I met Daniel on the first day of 5th grade when the teacher asked us to pair up for a science project. I remember him standing by his desk, swiveling nervously, clutching a binder smudged with blue marker. I smiled, my palms sweaty too, and offered to share my seat. He nodded, his grin uneven but genuine, and that was the beginning of something I thought would last forever. Over the next 22 years, Daniel and I became inseparable. We built forts in his backyard, swapped baseball cards, and whispered secrets late at night in our cramped dorm room at college. We were each other's greatest champion, each other's confidant. I would have sworn our bond was unbreakable, until I discovered the hard way that trust could fracture in a single devastating moment. From our earliest days, Daniel and I were Sam and Dean, he would say, quoting that fantasy novel we both loved. We wore matching friendship bracelets, red for me, blue for him, and vowed under the canopy of his parents' oak tree that we would always have each other's backs. I was the planner, meticulous, methodical, always jotting down details in my notebook. Daniel was the dreamer, creative, spontaneous, full of big ideas that hovered on the edge of impossible. Together, we balanced each other. When I fretted over homework deadlines, he reminded me to breathe. When he wrestled with directionless spells, I prodded him to set tangible goals. By high school, we were practically legendary in our small town. Friday nights found us at the baseball field, me cheering in the bleachers, Daniel pitching under the stadium lights, our cheers echoing into the night. On weekends, we'd pile into his beat-up sedan, windows rolled down, heads bobbing to classic rock as we fled to the nearest town, 50 miles away, just to catch a concert. In college, our friendship grew roots so deep that neither of us could imagine life without the other. We were roommates for our first 2 years. Our professors knew us as a package deal. Daniel writes code like a wizard, one would say, nodding at him, while Sam's business projections make investors sit up and take notice. After graduation, we decided to give our dream a chance. We founded Bright Path Solutions, a tech startup with grand ambitions, to develop an education platform that would personalize learning for every child, using algorithms that adapted to each student's pace. "We'll change the world," Daniel told me, eyes alight with conviction as we sat in a cramped cafe, laptops open, caffeine fueling our excitement. We rented a tiny office downtown, splitting rent and utilities evenly. Our routines aligned seamlessly. Daniel would code from dawn until dusk, headphones always on, while I schmoozed with potential partners, pitched to angel investors, and crafted our marketing strategy. We were confident, maybe too confident, that success was only a matter of time. The early months were magical. We won a small grant from the state's innovation fund, enough to hire 2 part-time programmers, and our prototype, an interactive learning app, garnered buzz among local educators. We celebrated even the tiniest victories, each new user download, each positive teacher testimonial. At night, we'd collapse on his lumpy couch, exhausted but exhilarated, talking about what we'd build next. On weekends, we'd go hiking trails strewn with golden leaves, reminding ourselves that our work, though consuming, was still only part of our lives. But as Bright Path grew, so did the pressure. Investors lingered in our inboxes, asking for detailed projections, demanding pitches polished to perfection. Our user metrics had to climb steadily or risk scaring off new backers. I was all spreadsheets and investor decks. Daniel was nights of debugging code, losing himself in syntax errors and feature enhancements. We began to live on different wavelengths. Our conversations reduced to status updates. How many active users this week? What's the server uptime percentage? Still, whenever doubt crept in, whenever some feature malfunctioned or a meeting went poorly, we would meet at our favorite diner on Main Street, 2 cups of stale coffee in front of us, and remind ourselves of why we'd started. In those moments, the old warmth returned, his easy grin, my conspiratorial smirk, a shared vision that felt unbreakable. We would promise each other that no matter how high Bright Path climbed, we'd never lose sight of our friendship. For a while, that promise held. Then came the day everything shifted, although at first I didn't understand why. It was early January in our 3rd year of operation when BrightPath's user analytics detected an unexpected spike at 3 a.m. In theory, that might have been good news. Maybe a school in a different time zone had adopted our platform, but the spike aligned with a full server crash that we couldn't immediately diagnose. When I arrived at the office the next morning, I found Daniel hunched over his keyboard in panic, red-eyed, headphones askew. "Hey," I said, relieving him of his mug. "What's up?" He exhaled sharply. "I thought I fixed it," he mumbled. "Everything was smooth. Then suddenly, the server's overloaded, and I see requests from an IP I don't recognize. We must be under attack. My stomach sank. So, what do we do? He shrugged. I'm working on it. It could be a bug, but I traced it. It looks like someone's trying to hijack our database. I frowned. But why now? We didn't change anything last night. He closed his eyes, throat bobbing, as if he had something on the verge of spilling out. Sam, did you happen to share our credentials with anyone else? Passwords, keys, anything? Of course I hadn't. I was obsessive about security. Look, I can show you my password manager logs. Nothing left this machine except the routine backups. Daniel rubbed his face. Okay, I'll work on locking it down. Yet when the day wore on, it became impossible to mask the panic humming beneath his composure. He shut his door and refused visitors, which threw the rest of our small 5-person team into jittery speculation. I felt it too, a subtle shift, like walking on a tightrope over a dark chasm. I texted him that afternoon. Want to grab dinner? Talk things out? No reply. An hour passed, then 2. I sent another. Everything okay? If you need help, I'll be there. Still nothing. I realized this wasn't just a server glitch. Something was wrong, really wrong. That evening, I decided to check the logs myself. BrightPath's backend dashboard had a feature that tracked every login, every access. I opened it and scrolled back to 2:47 a.m. There were multiple unauthorized entries, all converging on our core data repository. Student profiles, usage metrics, even private communication threads between teachers and students. Whoever did this could claim credit, steal our IP, or worse, expose private information. I clicked Trace IP, expecting to see a hacker location I couldn't identify. But to my astonishment, the IP was registered to Daniel's home address. It couldn't be true, but the geolocation matched. My chest tightened. I scrolled down further. Logins from his personal account, using his credentials. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I triple-checked. Yes, his account name, the exact login times, the exact queries executed. 11 months earlier, when I first opened the company bank account, my meticulous streak had insisted on a second administrator, Daniel's name beside mine, so that if anything happened to me, the account wouldn't be frozen. I never imagined I'd one day suspect him of manipulating it. My phone buzzed on the desk. I stared at it, unable to look away. Was I imagining it? Had I missed something? Had Daniel actually warned me? In a haze, I texted him. We need to talk, now. He finally replied at 11 p.m. Can't talk tonight. Too tired. Let's do it tomorrow. I stared at the words as if they were knives. Too tired? I typed back. Right, we'll see. That night, I barely slept. My dreams were a twisted tangle of memory. Daniel and me on the baseball diamond, the scoreboard flashing our names, my fingers hovering above the login button that stole everything. His face smiling down at me as I realized he was gone. When dawn arrived, I felt hollow, like someone had carved a trench through my chest. At 8 a.m., I crouched outside our office, taking a breath that felt like inhaling shards of glass. I pushed open the door, the stale scent of coffee lingering, and found Daniel already there, propped up on a hodgepodge of empty boxes staring at his laptop. His posture, slumped, defeated, should have stung me with sympathy. Instead, rage flickered in my veins. Don't pretend you don't know why I'm here, I said, my voice flat. He looked up, startled. Sam, I'm sorry. I've been trying to figure it out all night. I think it's a vulnerability in the API. Maybe someone got our keys. You're lying, I said. The logs show it. Your IP. Daniel's face paled. He shook his head. No, that can't be. I whirled the laptop around so the screen faced him. The logs, the timestamps. His home address as the source. His eyes widened. That's you, I said, heartbeat throttling. Either you ran it or someone's spoofing your IP. His lips trembled. He stood, walked to me, and placed a hand on my shoulder. Once a gesture of comfort, now contemptible. Sam, I'd never betray you. Then explain this, I demanded, jerking my arm away. He pressed fingers to his lips. Shit, just let me think for a second. He sank into his chair and buried his face in his hands. I took a step back. You have 15 minutes. Explain, or I'll call the authorities and let them sort it out. Daniel looked up, eyes red but defiant. He straightened his collar as though gearing up for a fight. Okay, you want the truth? The truth is, I was offered a deal I couldn't refuse. A big investor from Silicon Valley emailed me directly, said he loved BrightPath, but wanted to buy all the IP rights and build it under a bigger umbrella. He said if I were the sole founder, he'd give me a stake that could change my life. He didn't care about you. My legs wobbled. You want to build it without me? You'd dismantle our partnership? His jaw clenched. It's not just that. They offered $1 million upfront payment plus royalties. They convinced me that you, he jerked his chin toward me, would never understand. They said you were too risk-averse to scale BrightPath beyond a startup. They said they'd trash your name with a lawsuit if I didn't comply. They threatened me. I felt a surge of icy disgust. So you hacked our system, transferred everything onto their servers, then waited for me to find out? He stood, shoulders trembling. I didn't hack anything. They spoofed my IP. They did the dirty work. All I did was give them the credentials. I never went into the system directly. And I never wanted to hurt you. Sam, you have to believe that. I did it because I was desperate. Never made more than minimum wage growing up, and I want my parents to retire comfortably. I thought I could do it. Take a shortcut and everyone would be happy. Happy? I spat. You're delusional if you think money can replace years of trust. Do you have any idea what you've done? His eyes glistened. I know I fucked up. I know it's wrong, but I thought I could control it. They told me they'd spin it in a way that made both of us look like visionaries. They said I'd be the hero, and you'd come along as the key advisor. They played me, Sam. I panicked. I pressed my lips together, tasting bile. You think that justifies it? Tens of thousands of students rely on our platform. Teachers trust us with their privacy. And you gave all that away to some corporate vultures. Daniel's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I never wanted to screw you. I thought I was doing the right thing for both of us. Honestly, I was a coward. I cut him off. Save it. You made a choice. Now, live with the consequences. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. Behind the scenes, I reached out to a lawyer friend from college, Lisa, who specialized in intellectual property and tech litigation. While she began drafting a cease and desist letter to BrightPath's investor, who, by the way, was a shell corporation headquartered in Nevada, I dove into our platform's code repository, tracing every version to my personal Git branch. I collected emails, commit histories, text messages, anything that tied Daniel to the betrayal. Every night, I huddled in my cramped apartment, surrounded by printouts and spreadsheets, sorting through the wreckage of my life. I replayed every conversation I'd had with Daniel over the last year, searching for signs I'd missed. The late-night calls, he said, were to family, but were really back-channel communications with the investor. The tech conference in San Francisco he attended alone, claiming he was networking, when in fact, he was meeting with corporate scouts. Each revelation felt like a fresh stab in the chest. When Lisa finally delivered the cease and desist letter on Dawn's quiet wings, forcefully addressed to the unknown beneficiary of BrightPath Solutions intellectual property, I felt a flicker of hope. She assured me that as long as we could prove co-ownership, the investor's claim would collapse, and a lawsuit would likely follow. But even as I read her words, I understood. BrightPath's reputation was tarnished beyond repair. The platform we'd built would be adrift in legal limbo, users abandoned, teachers scrambling for alternatives. I felt a pang of sympathy, not for Daniel, but for the countless students relying on our site to help with algebra and history essays. In the days that followed, news of our internal conflict leaked to the local business journal. An innocuous headline, BrightPath co-founder sparks legal battle, hardly captured the magnitude of my pain, but it spread like wildfire. Soon, tech blogs picked it up, message boards buzzed with speculation. Some commenters defended Daniel's choice, praising him for ambition. Others denounced him as a traitor. My phone brimmed with messages, some offering sympathy, others gleefully pointing out my downfall. My social media DMs filled with strangers, sharing their own tales of betrayal. Co-founders who'd been ousted, partners who'd taken sole credit. I barely slept. Anger coiled around me like a living thing. I longed not only to reclaim BrightPath for myself, but to ensure Daniel paid for the betrayal. I wanted his grief to mirror mine. When Daniel emailed me, finally reaching out after a week of silence, claiming remorse, I ignored him. I refused to give him the soothing words he craved. Let him stew in his regret, I told myself. Only when I had full leverage would I grant him any clemency. Then came the investor's response. A lawyer named Gordon Pierce, representing Pathway Ventures. His letter was cold, stating that Daniel had full rights to the IP because he'd acquired 75% of the shares through a transfer agreement they claimed co-founder Sam had neglected to sign. They insisted that BrightPath's original articles of incorporation had a clause allowing majority shareholders to decide ownership if one founder became unavailable due to negligence. I stared at the letter in horror. There was a clause, buried in fine print, that I'd never noticed. Daniel had pressed me to sign our incorporation paperwork after graduation. I'd waved it off as standard formality. If I'd read the articles more closely, I would have seen the trap. Rage drained out of me in a cold, dark current. I realized that Daniel had played me from the start. He had maneuvered me into signing away control. He'd spent years nurturing my trust so he could seize the company when the time was right. I felt blood chill in my veins. All those years, our shared breakfasts, our laughter, our late-night brainstorming sessions, suddenly felt like a cruel charade. I called Lisa in a frantic burst. He has a clause in his favor. It's in the shares agreement. Pathway Ventures is twisting it, but they might have a point. Her voice was steady. We can contest it. That clause only applies if you were legally incapacitated or deemed unfit. You weren't. You were actively managing the company. We'll file for an injunction to freeze everything while we litigate. I exhaled, relief flooding me, even as sorrow lurked under my ribs. So, I might get it back? Possibly, she said, but it'll be a long battle, at least a year, and the public fallout might kill BrightPath's goodwill. Sometimes, Sam, the war isn't worth the price. Her words cut me to bone. Was I fighting for victory or for revenge? I couldn't answer. My mind was too consumed with fury. Litigation ensued in fits and starts, pleadings, depositions, discovery motions that dragged on for months. My days became a blur of legal strategy sessions with Lisa, drafting motions, responding to discovery requests, and flying to Denver for court hearings. At each step, I felt a mix of grim satisfaction and hollow regret. Whenever the judge granted a temporary restraining order, which froze Daniel's control over BrightPath, I felt triumphant. But each time I saw Daniel in court, pale and drawn, I recognized traces of our old friendship, the same nervous smile he gave when we met as kids, the faint habit of tugging at his collar when he was anxious. I wondered, did he still remember our promise under that oak tree, or had our shared past turned to dust in his mind? Occasionally during recess, I would sit alone in the gallery watching him pace the hallway, his face drawn, shoulders hunched. Sometimes, I felt compelled to approach him, to slap him back to that moment when he smiled and said, "We'll always have each other." But the rage that burned inside me acted like a vice. I always restrained myself. I had to win. It was as simple and as devastating as that. As the calendar pages turned, BrightPath's user base dwindled. The news of infighting leaked to local school districts, which started exploring other platforms. Our social media presence turned bitter. Parents demanding refunds, teachers lamenting the loss of a once reliable tool. I received countless apology emails from deflated customers. "We loved BrightPath. We're sorry it's falling apart." Each letter was a thorn in my side, a reminder that my vengeance was hammering nails into the coffin of something far bigger than Daniel and me. And still, I pressed on. I drafted scathing opposition briefs, deposed Daniel's former colleagues, and unearthed an email in which Daniel had admitted, 2 years prior, that he felt stifled working under my cautious leadership. He wrote that he yearned to control the company's vision entirely. It was bitter evidence, a confession of envy, buried under 600 lines of text. Reading it filled me with triumph. He had left a digital trail that confirmed his betrayal, and yet my heart convulsed with a dull ache. The turning point came 11 months after the server incident. Judge Hernandez issued a ruling. She found that while Daniel's share transfer clause might have been activated, it was invalid because he had acted in bad faith by collaborating with an outside investor to hijack BrightPath's IP. She granted me a preliminary injunction, compelling Daniel to relinquish control back to me and impound his portion of the shareholder proceeds with Pathway Ventures. A cheer welled up in me. The gavel's echo sounded like finality. I had won. Yet as I sat in the courtroom, the judge's clerk reading the decision aloud, I could feel warm tears trailing down my cheeks. Tears I did not expect. They weren't solely tears of victory. They were tears of lament. I realized that in vanquishing Daniel, I had also destroyed a piece of myself. Like Samson cutting off his hair, I had severed my own source of strength, our friendship, knowing I could never piece it back together. After the ruling, Daniel stood before me in a cramped hallway outside the courtroom. He looked as though the trial had aged him 20 years. Hollow cheeks, haunted eyes, a posture that slumped with the weight of defeat. He pressed a crumpled piece of paper into my hand, his final letter to me. I unfolded it, breath catching. It read, "Sam, I'm sorry. The money they promised me was supposed to lift the burden of my past. I was scared. Scared that we'd stay small forever. Scared I'd disappoint you. Scared I'd disappoint everyone who believed in me. I thought I could have it all, that I could control the situation and come out a hero. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I betrayed you, but I never stopped believing in us. Please understand that I'm not asking for forgiveness, only that you know I regret this every day. Daniel. My chest tightened. I wanted to throw the letter away, call him a selfish coward, and never think of him again. But when I saw the raw sorrow in his eyes, I could do neither. Instead, I pinched the corners of the paper and slipped it into my jacket pocket, where it would crease and fade over time, but never fully disappear. Although I regained control of Bright Path, I made the painful decision to dissolve the company. In a handwritten notice to our remaining customers and partners, I wrote, "It is with a heavy heart that I announce Bright Path Solutions will cease operations as of next month. Our team has been proud to support countless students and teachers over the past 3 years. Unfortunately, legal proceedings have compromised our ability to operate ethically and effectively. Thank you for your support. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. Sincerely, Sam Reynolds, CEOI." Hit send on my final email and felt a strange lightness. The platform that had carried my dreams, along with Daniel's, would become a relic, a cautionary tale. Yet, part of me felt liberated. I had honored my principles and avenged myself, but I had also recognized that the world we'd built together was unsalvageable. In the months that followed, I retreated from the public eye. I took a job as a consultant for a nonprofit focused on digital literacy in underserved communities. At first, the work was a balm, teaching fourth graders to code, helping senior citizens learn basic computer skills, offering workshops on safe internet practices. It was fulfilling. And yet, every time I introduced myself as Sam Reynolds, former CEO of Bright Path Solutions, the room would dim for a moment. The projectors in reporters' minds flickered to that courtroom, to Daniel's broken stare, to the files sealed away in legal vaults. Still, I tried to build a new life. I moved into a tiny loft downtown, furnished with secondhand thrift store finds. The walls were adorned with framed photographs from my pre-Bright Path days. Daniel and me at Lakewood Camp, paddleboarding in the summer, wearing identical neon jerseys at a charity 5K, drinking sodas with too much ice and too little sugar. I looked at them sometimes and felt both warmth and guilt wash through me. Guilt that I'd erased our dream. Warmth because those memories were once real. Once, we had believed in a future that was ours alone. One rainy afternoon, about a year after dissolution, I was sorting through piles of old boxes in my closet when I rediscovered the friendship bracelets, red and blue, now faded and fraying. I slipped them onto my wrist, the knot tying back to that oak tree promise. Always have each other's backs. I ran my finger over the loose threads and whispered, "You lied, but I don't hate you anymore." Before I could second-guess myself, I grabbed a pen and addressed a blank card. "Dear Daniel, I found these today. They're threadbare, just like our bond, but they remind me of who we once were. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything I put you through. I hope you're safe, wherever you are. If one day you find the courage, I'd like to hear your voice again. Not as a partner, not as a co-founder, but as my friend, Sam." I tucked the card in a plain white envelope, scribbling Daniel's old home address, though I wasn't sure he'd still live there. I sealed it and set it on my desk, foregoing immediate mailing. I wasn't ready. In the weeks that followed, I wrestled with the letter's meaning. Was it an olive branch or a sign of weakness? Would it bring me peace or reopen my wounds? In the end, I decided to leave it unopened, a testament to the fragile hope that one day we could transcend our shared tragedy. Life moved on in small increments. I started seeing someone. Claire, a librarian with quiet laughter and hair the color of wheat fields. She had no idea about Bright Path's downfall. I told her a sanitized version, one where my business failed due to market shifts, rather than murder by co-founder. She believed me and loved me anyway. On our first anniversary, she surprised me with friendship bracelets. This time, one green, one white. "For new beginnings," she said, slipping them onto my wrist. I sometimes wondered if and when I'd feel whole again. I knew vengeance had been a siren's call, sweet in the moment, but offering only empty satisfaction. In Claire's gentle presence, I began to learn how to breathe without anger tightening my lungs. I volunteered on weekends at a youth coding program, mentoring teenagers who reminded me of Daniel's boundless curiosity and my own eagerness. Each time, a student's eyes lit up when they solved a tricky bug or built a simple game. I felt a flicker of joy, authentic joy, something I hadn't felt in a long time. On a crisp autumn morning, as I biked to the community center, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I checked it. A notification from my P.O. box, registered under a pseudonym, mail arriving today. My heart thudded. I pedaled faster, anticipation and dread twisting inside me. When I arrived, the post office attendant handed me a plain white envelope with no return address. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was the card I had written, the neat cursive unmistakably mine, and a small slip of paper. Sam, thank you for reminding me who I once was. After we parted ways, I ran. I built a small life, teaching kids how to program, just like you. I never felt worthy of the friendship I lost, but I carried it with me every day. Seeing your bracelets again reminded me of our promise. I'm still here, Sam. Not exactly a hero, but a man who carries regret. If you ever want to talk, no ties to the past, just two old friends, I'm at this address. Daniel. My breath caught in my throat. I sat on the post office bench for a long moment, the world rushing by. Cars honking, people chatting on cell phones, wind rustling autumn leaves. I laid the card on my lap and silently thanked the universe for the simple miracle of his words. Tears filled my eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of something like forgiveness. I folded the card gently, tucked it into the pocket of my jacket, and walked out into the street, feeling for the first time in years that perhaps even the deepest wounds could heal. The sun peeked through a cloud, illuminating the sidewalk before me. In that light, I sensed a future that did not hinge on vengeance or betrayal, but on the stubborn, quiet possibility of redemption and reconnection. Whether Daniel and I would ever rebuild our friendship remained uncertain. But as I breathed in the autumn air, I realized that I was no longer bound by my rage. In that moment, I was simply a man who had lost nearly everything and was learning slowly to find his way back to hope.